that he's teasing in front of our eyes for like the last 10 minutes. So please give another round of applause to our very own William Anderson.
Thank you, everyone. Tonight, the theme I chose for the meeting is ultra learning. Now, I came across this when I was doing research for the theme I chose for the last meeting I was the Toastmaster. And when I looked at it, it was very interesting. And I thought it would be a good follow-up to what I did last time. Does anybody remember what the theme last time was?
To something learning related.
Self-learning?
Self-learning.
Self-learning, right. Okay. Now, what is self-learning? Okay, read that for us, nice and loud, okay?
Self-learning is the skill of teaching yourself anything you want to learn, gaining knowledge and experience through your own efforts.
Right. But that also would include if you hired a coach or a mentor, or if you hired tutor, not tutors, tutor, okay? Now, this is a very important quote for tonight. I want you to remember this because I will refer to it later on. Taylor, would you read that for us?
Learning how to learn is life's most important skill.
He wrote 17 books on the mind and learning, just so you know. He's very much an expert in this. But I found over time, after seeing this quote, other people referring to the same idea in different ways, and we'll see it a bit later. Now, what did we look at last time? The three things, the three steps to learning to be a better speaker? Do you remember? Learning about the best practices. Doing, applying those things to actually doing them, and then improving. So that's taking the feedback and going and being better. So it's every time, just learning, doing, improving, learning, doing, improving. That's the process of becoming a better speaker. Now, ultra learning is going to be a little bit different, okay? Now, what is the definition of ultra learning? Let's talk to the guy who actually wrote the book about it. Okay.
Ultra learning is a strategy for aggressive self-directed learning.
What's interesting about him is when I read the history about how he came to write this book, I found it very fascinating. But I didn't want to take a lot of time to go over that, so I made a concise paragraph and I made ChatGPT help me make sure I got it very simple. So I'm going to have someone read it and we look at it here. Let's see. Juana, would you go ahead and read that?
In 2006, Scott Young started a blog to explore a simple question: what is the ideal way to live? Over time, he became convinced that learning is the key to living well, which led him to focus on another question: what's the best way to learn? Through years of research and ambitious learning projects, he developed the insights that eventually became his 2019 book, Ultra Learning?
Ultra learning.
Ultra.
Now, you see, he said that he became convinced that what? Learning is the key to living well. Remember we said learning is the most important skill? So he came to conclude the same thing as he was looking and investigating what's the ideal way to live. And his conclusion is you need to learn. So he comes here and he says, through years of research, that's the learning process. And ambitious learning projects, the doing. And doing those projects, he would get feedback, not only from himself, but he had people that he guided them on ultra learning projects. And we're going to look at one a little bit later, which is very fascinating. But that's how it, learning, doing, improving. And so as he went through that process over all these years, he came to the conclusion of what is the best way to learn anything. If you want to learn it fast, and also learn something that's even difficult. All right, so here's the book. The yellow version there, I think that's the British one, and the green one is the English, or the American one. You can actually get both of them at Libris. You can order it, if you like real books, you can get it on Libris. It costs a lot more for the American one, because I'm assuming because the shipping cost. All right, so here's the 9 principles of ultra learning. I'm going to share look at three of them briefly, but there they are. Meta learning, focus, directness, drill, retrieval, feedback, retention, intuition, and experimentation. So a little bit more complicated than mine, right? Learning and doing, improving. Meta learning. What is meta learning? Learning about learning. Okay, so again, the third time, meta learning is that we need, the first most important thing we need to do is learn how to learn. So let's look at that. I'm not going to share much tonight, but I put a lot of resources together, including even like a summary of the book and all those 9 very nice ones. The first chapter of the book and some other resources. So downloads, I'll put those on WhatsApp group for a club, and for those that registered, I will send it to them. Okay? So you'll have that if you want to learn more. Now, there's Scott Young who wrote the book, Tristan de Montebello. He wanted to do a project, and he knew Scott, or he knew Scott. And he goes, how about if I do guitar? And Scott says, well, you already know how to play guitar a little bit, so I want something where you have to learn something you don't know, and something that'll be important, and that's not easy. So they spent 2 weeks going over it, and finally he decided on public speaking. He joined Toastmasters. Oh my goodness. I didn't know this when I decided I got this for the theme. I found it afterwards, okay? So what happened? How did he do? He made it to the final 8 in the World Championship of Public Speaking, 2017. Guess how long it took him to do that?
4 years.
7 months. It's blown away. You need to watch the interview of him, what he went through. I mean, from the beginning, he just went through so much stuff to do this. But 7 months, I was totally blown away. But when I saw what he did, I went, there's no way I would do that. It's very crazy, right? And in the process of doing this, his wife had a kid, okay, in the middle of it. So he was dealing with a lot of stuff. Right, so let's look at the key principles, at least the 3 things that stood out to me that are related to what I like, okay? High repetition. What does that mean? It's mean doing the thing you're trying to learn a lot, over and over and over. Guess how many times Tristan did speeches in that 7 months?
Hundreds.
He did 80 to 100 because he didn't keep close track. 80 to 100 in 7 months. Okay. Well, he lives in Los Angeles. So I checked ChatGPT. I said, how many clubs are there in LA? And he said 150. Okay,
No way.
But some of those are closed. They're not open to the public, you know. So, but still probably 100 or so, at least. Can you believe that? No wonder you could go to so many clubs. Here it's a little tougher. We only have 2 clubs in town.
Wow.
So the high repetition of doing that. Now, when I started competing in contests, I can tell you I do this in a much simpler and less intense way. Eventually I got to the point when I did good enough at the area to go to divisional. Before divisional, I would go to a couple of the IT firms that I did trainings at, and I would practice my speech in front of them, and there'd be 30, 40 people. I do that within a week, two different places. Sometimes I even go to my church, and I went to the Romanian club. So I tried to figure out ways to do that. Then if I made it to the district, I was going to go to the district, I went to Bucharest for a week, and I went to 3 meetings, and I did my speech in front of 3 different clubs. So that's how I use it, and I found it very helpful. Now I'm telling you, it's even helpful if you do it just once before you do a speech, even once. So if you're doing your pathway speeches, if you can get in front of your friends or family or colleagues and do your speech before you come here to actually give it, it'll be much better. I found even I took some time off, I didn't do speeches for 2.5 years. And I came back and I did my speech and it didn't go so great. But a couple days later, I felt like, man, I could even do it better now. So I just practiced it and it went much better. So just doing it in front of people really helps. So take that, that's good advice, okay? So that's high repetition, effective feedback. The way Scott said, he said, you need to look for the signal within the noise because a lot of feedback is not helpful. So like what I did, and I shared this 2 weeks ago, or 2 months ago, is I write down all the feedback I get from when I do a speech, group it all together, and then see what are the most key things most frequently come up. Then I know those are probably ones I want to focus on. Then I check the video just to make sure. Okay? So that's one way of doing it. what Tristan did, he got movie directors, improv coaches, and high-level Toastmasters to do his evaluations of his speeches and give him feedback. So when you, again, last week I told you about, I had a mentor who was he was a master trainer with Dale Carnegie, and I got him to give me feedback. So if you can find people with lots of experience and they can give you feedback, you'll find that very helpful. Okay? All right, focus drilling. Basically all this is working on one thing at a time. Say you're not using the stage well, the speaking area. So when you would practice, the whole practice time would be focused on using that. What if you had, your gestures were bad? Well, then you would just focus on your gestures the whole time when you were practicing for something. So in other words, it's very focused practice, and you don't focus on doing everything. Of course, you probably have to get the words down before you start doing this, so you can at least know what to say. But it's this idea that our brains can handle one thing much better than trying to do 3, 4 things at the same time. So remember that. If you get feedback that says that you use a lot of ums and ahs, what should you do? Practice saying it and be very careful, taking breaths, and recording yourself to see if you're actually getting better at that. So these are 3 things that will help you become a better speaker. Of course, it's for anything. You want to learn anything, these would be helpful. Okay, so that's our look at ultra learning for today. Like I said, I'll give you those resources, but for now, it's time to move on to motivational words, embracing lifelong learning. Let's give a